Thanksgiving was supposed to smell like sage and rosemary, like warmth, seeping through a cold November evening. I sat at my son Marcus's dining table and watched my daughter-in-law Fallon hover over the turkey as if a ceremony depended on it. The table glittered with their best china, the linen napkins folded into exact triangles, the candlesticks lit, even though it was barely 5:00 p.m. I told myself the perfection was love, not performance. I told myself a lot of things lately. "Mom, you barely touched your plate," Marcus said, carving another slice. He had been watching me with that careful concern that makes a person feel like a glass about to crack. "Fallon made your favorite stuffing." I smiled because smiling cost less than explanations. Appetite had left me months ago. Nothing tasted right, and nothing felt solid, not sleep, not memory, not the ache behind my eyes that never seemed to lift. Doctors had called it normal for a woman of 65 who had a few issues, a soft phrase that covered dizziness, nausea, and the odd way time blurred around the edges. Fallon leaned in perfume like cold flowers and added another spoonful of stuffing to my plate. "You need to eat, Geraldine. Look how thin you've gotten." Her voice was tender enough to pass inspection, but something in her gaze felt like a hand pressing on a bruise. "I made this batch special. Just the way you like it." I raised my fork. The kitchen clock clicked from 5:03 p.m. to 5:04 p.m. My phone buzzed against the table. A number I didn't recognize lit the screen. "Don't eat anything. Trust me." For a second, the room went distant, like sound underwater. I glanced up. Marcus was pouring gravy. Fallon was arranging green beans. The text glared at me. "Don't eat anything. Trust me." The words were absurd in their boldness, and yet my hand stalled halfway to my mouth. "Everything okay, Mom?" Marcus asked. "Just a message," I said, setting the phone face down and willing my pulse to quiet. Fallon's hand brushed my shoulder. Her smile held, but her eyes sharpened. "Your food is getting cold," she murmured. It took hours. I offered a polite apology and nudged the stuffing with my fork. Another buzz. "Leave now. You're in danger." The second text felt like a cold draft under the door. I looked at the plate herbs flecked on golden bread steam spiraling up, then at Fallon's expectant face. "Actually, I think I'm coming down with something," I said, pushing my chair back. Fallon blinked a hitch behind the smile. Marcus frowned. "Mom, you just got here." "I'm sorry," I whispered, already reaching for my purse, a small animal instinct telling me to get to the door, to err to anything that didn't look so perfect it could break. Fallon followed me to the foyer on quiet heels. "You can't keep running away every time we have dinner," she said, sweet, clipped into steel. "Running away," I repeated. Marcus stepped in, palms up. "You've left early the last 3 times. We're worried." I tried to remember, but recent weeks were a fogged window I couldn't wipe clear. I promised to call in the morning, kissed my son's cheek, and stepped into the cool evening. At 5:22 p.m., I drove home, the phone face down beside me, my heart a steady hammer. In my apartment, the quiet felt like relief and accusation. I stood in the hall mirror and took inventory. Yes, thinner. Yes, hollows where softness used to live. When had I started looking like a person fading down a corridor? I made tea, though it trembled in the cup as I carried it to the kitchen table. The texts sat on my screen like a stranger's hand on my shoulder. "Don't eat anything. Trust me. Leave now. You're in danger." People do not get mysterious warnings at holiday dinners, I told myself. People do not flee their families because of 4 words and a creeping unease. But people also do not wake at 3:10 a.m. to the room spinning while an empty stomach lurches as if it were full. Morning arrived gray and grainy. By 8:05 a.m., my headache had settled behind my eyes in a steady throb. I opened a notebook because paper does not argue. I wrote the dates I could recall: dinner at Marcus's house, where I felt dizzy afterward. A pot roast 3 weeks ago, that left me in bed for 2 days. A soup Fallon brought when I looked pale, followed by an emergency room visit. The barbecue in October, when I could not keep anything down for 2 days. The list grew to 8 entries spanning 4 months. I stared at the columns, food Fallon's sickness, and the pattern looked back at me. Maybe coincidence? Maybe not. The phone rang at 9:17 a.m. Marcus's voice was careful. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," I said. He exhaled. "Fallon feels terrible. She worries she didn't take good care of you." I thought of the stuffing pressed onto my plate, the gentle insistence that felt like a shove. "Marcus," I asked, "have I been getting sick more often?" He hesitated. "Yeah. The doctor says it can be age and all the medications." "What medications?" I asked, too quickly. Another pause, longer. "Mom, your blood pressure, your heart, your memory." The word landed with a metallic taste. "Memory. We've talked about this," he said softly. "Dr. Patterson put you on medication for early-stage dementia 3 months ago." When we hung up, the apartment seemed to tilt. I went to the bathroom cabinet and opened the mirror. Bottles lined the shelf like soldiers. A pill for memory with a name I could pronounce but had not held in my hand before 3 months ago. A blood pressure dosage higher than I remembered. Something I didn't recognize at all with instructions in small, stern letters. I tried to attach a memory to each bottle, a conversation in a bright office, a sheet of instructions, a kind voice explaining risks. Smoke. Everything turned to smoke. At 10:41 a.m., the doorbell chimed. Through the peephole, Fallon's careful face filled the circle. She held a covered dish, steam fogging the plastic. "Geraldine, it's me," she called bright as morning. "I brought you some soup." I stood silent while my pulse counted seconds. "Thank you," I said finally, keeping the door fastened by the chain. "I'm resting." "Oh, don't be silly. I'm family." Her voice thinned. "Let me take care of you." The knock came again, a shade harder. "Open the door," she said, irritation slipping through. I stayed still until her footsteps faded. When I peeked outside, she stood by her car phone to her ear, her free hand slicing the air. By early afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table with the pill bottles arranged like puzzle pieces. The texts chimed again at 2:06 p.m. "Check your labels. Look carefully." Fear and relief braided together in my chest. Someone else saw the fog I was trapped in. I traced dates, dosages, refills I didn't remember requesting. A thought arrived with unwelcome clarity. What if the confusion wasn't the cause, but the effect? That night, I didn't sleep. At 1:20 a.m., I watched the ceiling breathe with the streetlight shadows and made a decision that felt reckless and necessary. I would stop the new medications, the ones I could not remember asking for, just for a few days, while I watched myself as closely as a nurse watches a monitor. If the fog stayed, I would go back. If it lifted, I would listen to whatever the silence told me. The first morning without the unfamiliar pills left me jittery, as though a fever prowled under my skin. My hands trembled when I tried to pour coffee, and I wondered if I had made a dangerous mistake. By the second day, however, something shifted. The fog that had hung over me like a constant veil began to thin. I remembered where I had left my reading glasses. I recalled what I had eaten for breakfast 3 days earlier. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. On the third day, clarity returned in flashes, and with it came terror. If I wasn't losing my mind naturally, then someone was deliberately pushing me toward confusion. That evening, another text arrived. "Save samples of anything she gives you to eat. Hide them in your freezer." My breath caught. Whoever this mysterious messenger was, they seemed to know Fallon's routine as intimately as I did. I typed back with shaking fingers. "Who are you?" The reply came almost instantly. "Someone who cares." someone who's been watching. Why should I trust you? I asked. Because I'm the only one telling you the truth. I carried those words into the next day like a weight. Around 4:15 p.m., Fallon appeared at my door again, holding a steaming casserole. "Geraldine, you look better," she said, though the corners of her smile were stiff. I thanked her politely, keeping the chain on the door, but she pressed inside with the familiarity of someone who had claimed the space as her own. "You need to eat," she insisted, "and take your evening medications. I picked them up for you since you forgot." My stomach clenched at the sight of the small bottles in her hand, the very prescriptions I had deliberately left uncollected. "I'll take them after dinner," I lied, sliding into the chair she pulled out for me. The casserole looked harmless rice and chicken under a browned crust, but I trusted my instincts more than the aroma. When she turned to fetch a napkin, I spit the bite into my palm, wrapped it quickly, and tucked it into my robe pocket. Each false mouthful made my pulse race faster, but Fallon seemed satisfied with my performance. Only when she pressed the pills toward me did I resist outright. "I'll take them once you've gone," I told her, forcing a steady voice. Her eyes lingered on me too long, calculating before she finally left. The moment the door shut, I emptied the napkins into plastic containers, labeling them with the date before sliding them into the freezer. I flushed the pills down the toilet, then sat at my table, breath ragged. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without nausea or spinning vertigo. I woke feeling stronger, clearer, more certain than I had in ages. Which meant the danger was not my imagination. Someone was trying to erase me one bite at a time. By the following week, I knew I needed professional proof. I found a private lab about 20 minutes away that specialized in toxicology testing. At 9:30 a.m., I dropped off the samples I had saved, each container a tiny piece of evidence. The technician promised results in 3 days. That same afternoon, I visited Dr. Sarah Chen, a physician recommended online for her independence and compassion. She listened quietly as I laid out the timeline, the unexplained prescriptions, the pattern of sickness, the mysterious texts. She examined my pill bottles and frowned. "This medication," she said, pointing to the Seroquel, "isn't normally used for dementia. And this dosage of memory medication is unusually high." She asked me to complete a battery of cognitive tests, reciting number sequences, naming current events, recalling images. When we finished, she looked at me with genuine puzzlement. "Your memory and cognition are completely normal, even above average for your age," she said. Relief surged through me, tempered by dread. If my mind was intact, then everything I had been told was a lie. "Doctor," I asked quietly, "what would happen if someone took these medications without needing them?" Her face darkened. "They could experience confusion, memory loss, dizziness, even organ damage at high levels. In someone your age, it could be lethal." She drew blood for testing and promised results by the next morning. As I left her office, my phone buzzed again. "Be careful. She's getting suspicious. Vary your routine." This time, the message included a revelation that chilled me to the bone. "I work at Dr. Patterson's office. You're not the first patient this has happened to." The world tilted. How many others? That night, Marcus called at 7:05 p.m. "Mom, Dr. Patterson says you missed your last appointment. He's worried. Fallon's making soup and will come by tonight." Panic struck like a cold slap. I texted my unknown protector in haste. "They're coming with food. What do I do?" "Don't be there. Go somewhere public. Stay away until tomorrow." At 7:20 p.m., I knocked on my neighbor Helen Chen's door, not the doctor, but the elderly woman across the hall, who had always greeted me kindly. "Could I stay here tonight?" I asked. She opened her home without question. From her living room, I heard Marcus and Fallon pacing outside my apartment, voices sharp with frustration. Fallon's words carried clearly through the thin walls. "She's not here. No, her car's still in the lot." We might need more drastic measures. The next morning, Dr. Chen called with urgency. My blood tests showed dangerously high levels of multiple medications, some I hadn't even been prescribed. Mrs. Hartwell, she said gravely, someone is drugging you. If this had gone on much longer, it could have killed you. An hour later, the lab confirmed what my body already knew. The casserole was laced with the same drugs. The picture sharpened into horror. Someone had been systematically poisoning me, and all the arrows pointed to Fallon. The question that burned like fire was why. The answer arrived in another text. Check your will. Check your bank accounts. She has power of attorney. My hands shook as I rifled through my file cabinet, and there it was, an unfamiliar document granting Fallon control over my finances and medical decisions signed only 3 months earlier. My own signature stared back at me, though I had no memory of ever holding the pen. I sat frozen at the kitchen table, staring at the document that claimed to bear my signature. Power of attorney. The neat lines of ink said, Fallon controlled my finances, my medical decisions, my very life, if I were deemed incompetent. And according to Dr. Patterson's notes, I already had dementia. My stomach clenched as if the poisoned food were still inside me. This wasn't just about making me sick. It was about erasing me. By 11:45 a.m., I had Dr. Chen on the phone again. My voice shook as I explained what I had found. You need to contact the police immediately, she urged. This isn't just medical misconduct, it's attempted murder and fraud. 2 hours later, Detective Maria Santos arrived at my apartment. She was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes that softened only when she saw my trembling hands. I spread everything on the table, the pill bottles, the toxicology reports, the food samples, the forged power of attorney. She listened, her pen moving swiftly over her notebook. Mrs. Hartwell, this is serious. Attempted murder, elder abuse fraud. But it will tear your family apart. Are you prepared for that? Her words stung, but they also lit something resolute inside me. Detective, I whispered, my family is already torn apart. I just didn't see it until now. She nodded. We'll need search warrants for their home and Dr. Patterson's office. Whoever has been texting you may be key. That night, I lay awake, listening to the hum of my refrigerator and the occasional car on the street. I thought about Marcus, about how he had believed every word Fallon fed him. He saw a sick mother slipping into confusion, not a woman being slowly poisoned. I thought about the trust I had given Fallon, about every spoonful of food I had accepted with gratitude. Betrayal doesn't arrive with a shout. It creeps in with a smile, a gentle hand on your shoulder, and the words, "Eat, it's good for you." The investigation moved faster than I expected. The next day, Detective Santos called. Dr. Patterson is cooperating. He admits he relied heavily on family reports of symptoms. He didn't realize how manipulated he'd been until we showed him your results. She paused. There are other patients, Mrs. Hartwell. We're finding at least 6 similar cases. My knees went weak. Fallon's scheme wasn't unique to me, she had a pattern. How many elderly people had trusted her? How many had been stripped of health and dignity while she smiled across the table? That evening, Marcus called, his voice strained. Mom, the police came to our house. They took Fallon's computer papers. They said someone accused her of poisoning you. My throat tightened. Marcus, come see me, alone. An hour later, he sat across from me, his face pale, as I laid out the evidence. The toxicology reports, the food test results, the power of attorney I never signed. He stared at the papers as though they were written in another language. This can't be right. Fallon has been helping you. She brought your food, your medicine. His words trailed off, but the realization was already dawning in his eyes. She was poisoning me, Marcus, I said softly. For months, slowly, so I would seem weak, confused, incompetent. He pressed his hands over his face, shoulders heaving. No. She wouldn't. She loves us. I reached across and touched his arm. She loves control, and debt drove her to it. Detective Santos told me she owes over $100,000. To her, my apartment and savings look like salvation. The truth fell between us like shattered glass. Marcus looked broken, a man who had loved and trusted the wrong person. She fooled me too, I whispered. We were both victims. He nodded faintly, but said nothing more. By the following afternoon, Detective Santos called again. We've arrested your daughter-in-law. She's charged with attempted murder, elder abuse fraud, and forgery. The evidence is overwhelming: poisoned food, forged documents, financial records. Her voice grew heavier. There are other victims. Your case helped us connect the dots. I hung up and sat in silence, the enormity of it pressing down. Relief mingled with sorrow. Fallon was behind bars, but Marcus had lost his wife, and I had lost the illusion of family harmony. Poison lingers long after the source is gone. The weeks that followed were a blur of interviews, legal documents, and cautious steps toward healing. Dr. Chen supervised my withdrawal from the unnecessary medications. Each day, the fog lifted further. I began to feel like myself again, though my trust in others felt thin as glass. Marcus visited, often guilt written into every line of his face. One evening, as we ate quietly at my kitchen table, he finally asked Mom, "Can you forgive me for not seeing it?" I looked at him, the boy I raised, the man who had been deceived, and I felt the anger soften. There's nothing to forgive, sweetheart. We both believed a lie because it came wrapped in love. His tears came then silent and unguarded. For the first time in months, I let myself believe we could rebuild. 6 months later, I sat in a courtroom. Fallon, in an orange jumpsuit, looked smaller than I remembered. The judge's voice rang out, sentencing her to 15 years in prison with restitution to all her victims. When given a chance to speak, she said, "I never meant for anyone to get seriously hurt. I was just trying to secure my family's future." The judge's reply was swift. "You poisoned the vulnerable for profit. That is not security. That is cruelty." Marcus sat beside me, his face a mask of sorrow and disbelief. Their marriage had ended in divorce 3 months earlier after he uncovered her theft from his own accounts. He squeezed my hand during the hearing, and I squeezed back. Neither of us said a word. We didn't need to. The courthouse doors closed behind us with a heavy echo, but the weight I carried was far more personal. Fallon had been sentenced, yet her shadow still stretched across my life. In the weeks after the trial, I moved slowly, relearning what it meant to trust my own body, my own mind. Dr. Chen guided me carefully off the unnecessary medications, adjusting dosages with precision. The withdrawal was not easy: sleepless nights, trembling hands, headaches that pressed like a vice. But each day, I felt a little more present, a little more myself. The fog lifted in layers until finally I could see the world without distortion. For Marcus, the recovery was different. He carried guilt like a cloak he couldn't shake off. Many evenings he came to my apartment, shoulders slumped, words tumbling from him in broken pieces. "I should have protected you. I should have seen through her lies." I listened, and sometimes I cried with him. But mostly, I reminded him of the truth: we had both been deceived by someone who wore kindness like a mask. Blame would not rebuild our lives. Forgiveness, though hard, was the only path forward. 3 months after Fallon's sentencing, I made a decision that surprised even myself. I sold my apartment. Marcus was startled when I told him. "Mom, where will you live?" he asked. His voice caught between worry and disbelief. "In Florida," I answered. I found a small house near the beach, sunlight, a little garden, and neighbors who spend mornings walking and evenings laughing. He protested at first, reminding me of the doctors and friends I had in town. But I knew what I needed: distance from the place where every wall whispered memories of sickness and betrayal. The house in Florida welcomed me like a clean page. White curtains fluttered in sea breezes, and mornings smelled of salt and hibiscus. I joined a pottery class, played cards with neighbors, and took long walks on the shore at 6:30 a.m., my feet sinking into the cool sand. For the first time in years, I felt anticipation for the future, rather than dread of the next doctor's appointment. Nancy Williams, the nurse from Dr. Patterson's office who had sent those first anonymous texts, visited before I moved. She was younger than I expected, with tired eyes but a steady voice. I was terrified, she admitted as we sat in my half-empty living room. I didn't know how to warn patients without proof. But you listened, even when it sounded crazy. You saved yourself. Tears burned my eyes. You saved me, I whispered. She shook her head. No, you trusted yourself again. That takes incredible strength. In Florida, Marcus and I began the slow work of repairing our bond. He called nearly every evening at 8:00 p.m., telling me about his day, asking about mine. One night, his voice held something new. Mom, I've started seeing someone. Her name is Sarah. She's a teacher, kind and steady. My heart softened at the relief in his tone. I'm glad, I told him. You deserve peace after everything. A year passed. The scars of betrayal remained, but they no longer defined me. I found myself laughing again, cooking meals for myself, without fear, planting flowers in the sandy soil outside my little house. Sometimes in the quiet evenings, I reread the texts that had changed everything. Don't eat anything. Trust me. Leave now. You're in danger. I had kept them all tucked in a folder on my phone, a reminder of the moment when my life might have ended. But instead, a stranger's warning opened the door to freedom. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in streaks of orange and pink, I sat on my porch with a glass of iced tea. The breeze carried the sound of laughter from my neighbors down the street. I thought about how close I had come to losing everything, to being reduced to confusion, to dying quietly while the world believed it was natural. And I thought about what I had gained, instead: clarity, resilience, and a second chance. Marcus was visiting the next month, and I looked forward to it. We weren't the same as before. Trust once broken doesn't stitch itself back together quickly. But we were learning. We had both discovered a hard truth. Love without vigilance can be dangerous. You cannot assume people act in your best interest just because they smile. You must listen to your instincts even when others dismiss them. That night, watching the waves shimmer under the last light, I whispered a silent toast to Nancy, to Dr. Chen, to Detective Santos, and even to myself. Survival is not just about living through danger. It's about finding the strength to trust your own voice again. At 65, I had learned I was far stronger than I ever imagined. If you've stayed with me through this journey, I'd love for you to share your thoughts. What would you do if you received a message like mine? Have you ever doubted yourself only to discover your instincts were right? Tell me in the comments below. And if this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Together, we can remind each other that vigilance and hope can carry us through the darkest trials.